This is the story of how my wife cheated on me with my stepdad, thinking his mansion was his. Little did she know, the mansion was mine. I can't describe the embarrassment and humiliation I feel sharing this. How else do I explain that my wife of 7 years betrayed me with my stepdad, my mother's husband? Yes, my wife slept with my stepdad. I'm 38 years old, married for 7 years to Celia, also 38. Our marriage had its ups and downs, like most relationships, but our downs mostly stem from one thing. Celia thought I was too attached to my mom. She often called me a mama's boy. I won't deny it. My mom was my world, and I'm glad I loved her the way she deserved. She raised me alone, giving me everything she could and more, even beyond her means. For most of my life, my mom was a single parent. 10 years ago, my mom met Andrew, a divorcee in his early 50s. I don't know what she saw in him after being single for over 2 decades, but she married him. While I was happy for her, Andrew was never a father figure to me. Our relationship was distant, limited to polite greetings and small smiles. When my mom passed away 2 years ago, Andrew stayed in her house. I didn't visit him after her funeral. In my mind, his existence faded with my mom's passing. But everything changed the day I saw him with my wife. One afternoon, I left work early to meet a friend. On my way, I spotted Andrew and Celia sitting at a roadside cafe. Their body language wasn't friendly or formal. It was intimate. His arms were wrapped around hers, and their chemistry was unmistakable. It wasn't the kind of embrace that said, "I'm mourning your mom." Shocked, I continued to my friend's place, but I was too distracted to enjoy the meeting. When I got home, I confronted Celia. I told her I saw her with Andrew. Her face turned pale, and she stumbled over her words before claiming they had bumped into each other and decided to have lunch. She said Andrew was lonely and grieving, and she was consoling him. She even added, "That's why he held my hands while talking about your mom." I didn't tell her what I saw. His arms wrapped around her, their flirtatious body language. Instead, I decided to investigate further before confronting her again. Celia is a nail artist and works weekends with weekdays off. Our schedules never clashed before, but recently, her absence became a problem. We argued often because she was too busy for our relationship. She even called me needy, saying I hadn't been this way when I visited my mom twice a week. Things escalated when she suggested inviting Andrew to Thanksgiving. She argued he was lonely and had no one to celebrate with. Reluctantly, I agreed, curious to see how they'd behave around me. Thanksgiving dinner was awkward. Celia tried to keep the conversation light, but Andrew and I were silent most of the time. Though I didn't have solid proof of their affair, the atmosphere was tense. After that night, I knew I needed answers. I planted a GPS tracker in Celia's car and told her I'd be out of town for work. On the day of my supposed trip, I monitored her location. She drove to Andrew's house in the afternoon, instead of confronting them myself. I called my friend Keith for help. I asked him to visit Andrew's house and check what was going on. After some hesitation, he agreed. Keith entered Andrew's house under the pretense of checking in. With his phone camera hidden in his shirt pocket, he walked through the house and found them, naked and cuddling in the bedroom. Keith quickly apologized and left before they realized what he'd seen. Andrew followed him outside, demanding an explanation, but Keith excused himself and drove away. Unfortunately, Keith forgot to switch to the back camera on his phone, so all he recorded was his own face and some audio of Andrew and Celia yelling at him. Even without the video proof, I had confirmation of their affair. I packed a few essentials and went to Keith's house to stay. His wife was out of town, so he offered me a place to crash. Celia has been blowing up my phone with calls and texts, but I've ignored her. She thinks I'm still out of town for work. 4 days have passed. I've contacted a lawyer and plan to serve her divorce papers soon. I'll also ensure she's evicted from my house. So yeah, Andrew wasn't just lonely, he was sneaky. And inviting him for Thanksgiving, that was the ultimate insult. I'm sorry. Opie, looks like your instincts were spot on about him all along. It took 10 days for the lawyer to send over the divorce papers. Celia was reluctant to sign and insisted on a discussion. My lawyer suggested trying an out-of-court settlement, which would save time and money. As a sales guy with a regular job, I had limited funds for lawyers and only so many leaves to attend court, so I agreed to a meeting in my lawyer's presence. However, when I showed up, Celia insisted on a private conversation. I resisted, but my lawyer encouraged me to go for it, as long as I didn't say or agree to anything she demanded. He set some boundaries for the meeting. No touching, no hugging, no confessions. Honestly, I was disgusted by her presence. She tried to hug me, but I pushed her away. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, but after reading so many stories about cheaters on Reddit, I knew exactly what they say. I responded, "Yeah, sure, you were just helping an old man with his loneliness, right?" She admitted that what Keith saw was true, but it was just cuddling, nothing more. Cuddling without clothes, of course. But then, she said something that left me speechless. She said she did it to safeguard her future. I was stunned. She explained, "Your mom left all her wealth to Andrew. If he marries someone else, that woman would be entitled to the wealth. Your family's property would go to someone else. So, that's why she had slept with my stepdad, to become my stepmother and claim my mother's wealth." I could hardly process what she was saying. I felt dizzy from her twisted logic and stormed out of the meeting. When I got back, my lawyer asked me for the details of the conversation. I told him everything. He cracked up for a moment, but quickly became more interested in the inheritance my mother had left. My mom had left me a house she inherited from her uncle, a mansion far beyond my means. After we got married, Celia was always eyeing that mansion. She even insisted that we move into it after my mom passed, but I refused because it was my mom's house, and I didn't want her to move out. Celia argued that I was the only son, and the house would eventually come to me. So why not move in now? That led to frequent arguments between us. One day, I told her that Mom had willed the house to Andrew. Turns out, that was a lie I told her, but it came back to bite me in a way I never expected. Celia went after my stepdad, trying to get the mansion for herself. What she didn't know was that after my mom's death, I didn't transfer the house into my name. I wanted Andrew to live there for as long as he wanted. Besides, transferring the house into my name was expensive, and at that time, I didn't have the funds for it. But I'm glad I didn't, because had I transferred it, Celia would have been entitled to half during our divorce. She had no idea the mansion was already mine, and I intended to keep it that way. I'm sure if she had known, she would have never divorced me. She tried to convince me to have second thoughts about the divorce, saying she'd get Andrew to give her the mansion. I laughed it off, saying, "No thanks, good luck with your mansion." She smirked and said, "You're losing a lot by divorcing me." I smiled and said, "I don't care." Celia was never after anything except my mom's inheritance. But after everything, I feel so relieved the divorce is finalized. Celia dug her own grave by confessing her intentions to marry Andrew for the mansion. Now, I'll use that to drive Andrew out of her life for good. I saw Andrew picking her up from the court and helping her with legal matters during our divorce. I was just waiting for the divorce to be over, so I could burst her bubble and watch her reaction. Now that it's done, the next thing I'm going to do is ruin her life. Honestly, Celia was too dumb for words. The fact she was so obsessed with the mansion after our wedding is a huge red flag. It all makes sense now. She entered this marriage with greedy eyes. Celia clearly had ulterior motives from the start, and I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Trying to defend her cheating by claiming it was for your own good? Wow, she's really out of touch with reality. It's a shame she cared more about getting her hands on that mansion than being faithful to you. After the divorce was finalized, I sent Andrew the details of Celia's confession. He was stunned. "You know your mom willed the mansion to you, right?" he asked. I confirmed it. "Celia doesn't know," I added, but she's going to ask you to give it to her. I wasn't doing Andrew any favors by telling him the truth. I just wanted to pop Celia's delusional bubble. She thought the mansion was hers for the taking. Andrew told me that recently Celia had been asking him about his will and who would get his inheritance. But he didn't get why she was so interested. He had no wealth to his name. I ended the conversation there, not wanting any bro code with Andrew. A little while later, Celia called me. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but I knew what it was about. She was furious. Why didn't you tell me your mother willed the house to you? I was literally licking Andrew's but to secure your property, and you destroyed me instead, she yelled. I just laughed at her. The pain in her voice came from a place of hurt, and I said, "Thanks for your service and good luck with your game." I hung up and blocked her number. A few days later, she called from an unknown number. It was from one of her friends or colleagues. She told me that Andrew had dumped her. Apparently, he found out her real intentions. She'd been with him for the mansion, and when the truth came out, he called her out for being greedy. Celia raged at him, saying she was just trying to help him cope with his loneliness. I sarcastically replied, "Yeah, sure, you F everyone selflessly and only for their good, right?" She didn't give up. She kept trying to contact me, gaslighting me, and pleading to get back together. She even showed up at my house, my office, and some places I frequented. The worst part was when she showed up at the gym and tried to corner me. It was a nightmare, but I ignored her completely, like she was a stranger. Technically, she was one now. Our divorce was over. I thought this whole saga was behind me, but it resurfaced when I transferred ownership of the mansion to my name. I'd waited 6 months after the divorce to do it. I didn't have the savings at the time, but now that my expenses had gone down, I could afford it. Before making the transfer, I let Andrew know. By that point, he wasn't living there anymore. After I found out about his affair with Celia, I didn't ask him to leave, but he did take his belongings. He even made me the admin of the house's security system. It took a few months for all the paperwork to process, and in the meantime, I painted the place and cleaned up the lawn and pool, which had been neglected. I hadn't heard from Celia since our last conversation, and I figured she had moved on. But one day, the cleaning manager called to say that a woman had come into the mansion. She claimed to be my wife, but when she was feeling the walls and interiors, the staff suspected she was trespassing. They tried to stop her, but she insisted. I told them to kick her out. I had no wife. A few days later, she showed up at my apartment. She was crying and wailing that I had abandoned her, claiming that she did no wrong and that her intentions were pure. I told her to get therapy, and maybe a mental hospital would help her more than my house. She begged to come inside and talk, but I shut the door in her face. A month later, I rented out the mansion. I'd considered moving there myself to save on rent, but when I did the math, the mansion's rent was at least twice what I was paying for my current apartment. Plus, it was too big for just one person. Maybe if I get married and have kids, I'll move in, but for now, I don't see that happening. I also took out a restraining order against Celia for the mansion. I didn't trust her not to try something, even though she hadn't been violent. I wanted to protect the new tenants from her behavior. So far, everything has been smooth. I hope there won't be any more updates. I want to close this chapter with Celia and move on with my life. She's proven herself to be untrustworthy. You can't trust someone who does what she did. Cheaters always want to play the victim, claiming they were abandoned, when in fact, they abandoned the relationship the moment they entertained the idea of cheating. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, but you made the right call. You've got your mom's mansion, and you did everything smartly. She had no chance in the end. Your mother raised you right. What do you think about all this? Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more updates. See you next time.